Forests have a way of hiding things. Sound doesn't travel the same. Distance feels different. And when something happens out there, there's often no one else around to witness it. Story 1. Hunter or Hunted. This happened when I was younger. During a summer trip I took with my father. We were staying on a large piece of rural land, far away from town, surrounded by miles of open terrain and scattered trees. The area was used for hunting, and we were there to help deal with an animal problem that had been tearing up the property. The drive took most of the day. By the time we arrived, the light was already beginning to fade. There was a small cabin on the land, old, unused for a while. Inside, everything felt neglected. Dust, insects, signs that animals had gotten in at some point. We cleaned enough to make it livable, laid out sleeping bags, and tried to settle in for the night. I remember laying there, unable to relax. Nothing was happening, but I had this persistent feeling of being watched. I didn't say anything. I assumed it was just nerves. In the morning, we went out early to look for tracks and decide where to set up later. The heat came quickly out there. Some mornings were the only reasonable time to move around. After a while, we found signs in the ground and followed them into a lightly wooded area. That's when my father stopped abruptly and held his arm out in front of me. Someone was standing ahead of us. At first, I thought it was another hunter. This was private land, and the entrance gate had been locked when we arrived. The figure stood partially hidden behind trees, motionless. We started moving closer. My father called out, identifying us and asking who they were. They didn't respond. The person didn't move at all. As we closed the distance, something felt off. They were wearing heavy winter clothing, a bright jacket, thick pants. Didn't make sense. The temperature was oppressive. There was no reason anyone would be dressed like that. My father called out again. Nothing. He positioned himself in front of me and quietly prepared himself, telling me to stay behind him. We circled to get a better angle. I stayed where I was while he approached from the side, continuing to speak to the person, asking if they were alright. When he stepped directly in front of them, he stopped, completely still. After a moment, he turned his head slightly and said, confused, "It's not a person." It was a mannequin, dressed from head to toe, standing upright, placed deliberately among the trees. As I got closer, one detail stood out immediately. The clothes were pristine. No dirt, no debris, no signs They had been exposed to the elements for more than a very short time. That's when the feeling returned. That same sensation from the night before. The unmistakable sense of being watched. I looked at my father and could see it on his face too. Something has shifted. He didn't hesitate. He told me quietly that we were leaving immediately. He kept his attention on the surrounding trees the entire way back. I remember trying not to cry, overwhelmed by a fear I couldn't explain. Packed up as fast as we could and left that day. The drive back was quiet. Neither of us said much. Later, we learned that when the owner returned to the land, there was nothing there. No mannequin. No signs of anyone having been on the property. To this day, I don't know what that was meant to be. I only know that it wasn't accidental. And whatever placed it there didn't want to be seen. Story 2. Something in the meadow. This happened during a summer when I was working deep in the wilderness with a small crew. We spent most of the time far from roads, far from towns, rotating between backcountry sites for weeks at a time. When you live like that, the forest starts to feel familiar. You stop questioning every sound. At least, that's what I thought. One of our final assignments was in a chain of open meadows surrounded by forest. When we arrived, something felt off immediately. The person who brought us in seemed rushed. He showed us where we'd be working and left without staying the night, which was unusual. At the time, I didn't question it. I actually liked the privacy for our crew. The first days passed without anything dramatic happening. Just small frustrations. Our water filter broke almost immediately. When we replaced it later, the new one failed too. Tools we left in one place would be somewhere else in the morning. Heavy tools. Things no one would move casually. We joked about it, brushed it off. Then the noises started. If you spend enough time outdoors, you get used to animals, wind, trees falling. This was different. Late at night, we'd hear a metallic banging sound echoing across the meadow. It didn't have a clear source. The first time, I thought something was messing with our storage containers. But when we checked, nothing had been touched. Everyone had heard it. The worst night came near the end of our time there. After dinner, my crew leader and I walked back to our tents. We'd taken the same path countless times. There was a large fallen tree we always used to climb over. It was dusk, not quite dark yet. He let me go first. As I stepped down the other side, I looked up, and I froze. In the clearing ahead of us, and not far away, was a woman. She was crouched low to the ground, her body covered completely by what looked like a pale sheet. the fabric draped over her head and shoulders, hiding her face. I could only see the outline of her profile. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. My crew leader stepped over the log behind me and stopped instantly. I asked him what he was seeing, just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. He described the same thing. When he turned on his headlamp, my fear somehow deepened. She was still there. Clearer now. Real. After a moment, I begged him to turn the light off. He did, and when it came back on, she was gone. No sound, no movement. That night, I didn't sleep alone. We didn't talk about what we'd seen. We both pretended it hadn't happened. The next morning, as we were packing up, something crawled beside my tent. Close. On the side I couldn't see. I screamed. When help came, there was nothing there. When the summer ended, I returned home. I tried to forget everything. I convinced myself it had been exhaustion, stress, or my imagination. Weeks later, I went back through notes I'd written while I was out there. Things I wanted to look up once I had access again. That's when I learned the history of the area. The meadow we had been working in was well known for strange encounters, stories spanning decades, reports of a woman appearing near camps, metallic sounds at night, objects moved, experienced outdoorsmen refusing to stay there. I realized then that what we'd seen wasn't isolated. That terrified me more than the experience itself. I don't doubt myself anymore. I know what I saw. I still think about the work we did there. Part of me wants to return one day, just to see it again. But I don't think I ever will. Story 3. Humming in the forest. I was camping alone in a wooded area. Something I had done many times before. I was familiar with being on my own. Familiar with the sounds of forests at night. Nothing about that evening felt unusual at first. I settled into my tent, read for a while, had a couple of drinks, and went to sleep. The forest was calm. No wind. No animals moving nearby. I was half asleep when I became aware of a sound. At first, it blended into the background. Soft, melodic. It took me a moment to realize what it was. Someone was humming. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. Somewhere beyond the edge of the clearing. The tune was steady, perfectly controlled, as if whoever was humming never needed to breathe. I listened for a while, frozen. The sound didn't change. It didn't get closer or farther away. Eventually, I forced myself to unzip the tent slightly and look outside. The moment I did, the humming stopped. Not gradually, not fading into the distance. It stopped instantly. I stayed there for a few seconds, waiting. The forest remained silent. I told myself it had to be someone messing around. A prank, maybe a recording. I said something out loud, telling whoever it was to go away. Nothing happened. I started to close the tent. That's when the humming started again. Much closer, much louder, and coming from the opposite direction. There was no way someone could have moved that fast without making a sound. The woods were completely still. Before I had time to think it through, I stepped out of the tent and turned toward the sound. That's when I saw it. It was standing near the tree line, not far from me, shaped like a person, but wrong. It was far too tall, its body thin, its limbs unnaturally long, as if stretched. The head looked too small for its body. I couldn't see the details of its face. It was there, facing me, but the features seemed swallowed by shadow. It wasn't completely still. It moved slightly, the way a living thing shifts its weight when standing. I knew instantly that this wasn't a prank. This was something physical, something real, something aware of me. I was terrified in a way I had never felt before. My body wouldn't respond. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. The humming stopped. Then it started again. This time, it wasn't a tune. It was saying my name. It sounded like my voice, but wrong. The cadence was off. The syllables stretched and misplaced, as if something was intimidating speech without understanding it. That lasted only seconds, but it felt endless. At some point, something in me snapped. I turned and ran. I ran blindly through the forest, not caring where I was going. I didn't stop until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. For a long time, I stayed there, pressed against the tree, listening. The forest was silent again. Eventually, I forced myself to return to the campsite. I grabbed only what I needed and left the area as quickly as I could. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed inside. Once morning came, I packed and left. After that, I stopped camping alone for a long time. Whatever was in those woods that night changed the way I experience quiet places. I still don't know what it was. I only know that it was there. Story 4: Dangers of the Forest. This happened during one of my first long trips into the wilderness with my partner. I was still new to extended backpacking trips, and while I loved being outdoors, I hadn't learned yet how different the woods feel when you're far away from people. We were deep in an area known for wildlife. I was nervous about it. My husband not so much. He was prepared in a way that made me feel safer. Gear secured, knives visible, spray ready. The plan was simple. Hike for several days, camp along the route, enjoy being away from everything. The first hours were all uphill. Heavy packs, labored breathing. In places like that, you're supposed to make noise so you don't surprise animals. But when you're exhausted, conversation fades. Eventually, there were long stretches where neither of us spoke. That's when I noticed how quiet it had become. No birds or insects, just the sound of water moving somewhere below the trail. The silence felt wrong. I was walking ahead when the trail leveled out. As soon as I crested the ridge, I stopped. Sitting directly in the middle of the trail, not far in front of me, was a bear. It was massive, calm, watching me. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I just stood there, slowly waving my arm behind me, trying to get his attention without making a sound. The bear rose from sitting to all fours, still staring at us. My husband pulled me back behind him and started shouting, loud, commanding, the kind of yelling that doesn't waver. The bear didn't charge, but it didn't retreat either. It moved closer, slowly. Then something cracked loudly in the woods. The bear heard it too, and bolted toward the water. A second crack followed, closer this time. We didn't say much. We just moved, putting as much distance as we could between ourselves and whatever had made that sound. That's when I felt it again. That feeling of being watched. My husband stopped suddenly. I turned, and so did he. Behind us, back where we had been standing, was something else. At first, it looked like another animal, but it was too big, much bigger than the bear. It stood with its back to us, then slowly rose upright. The shape was similar, but the proportions were wrong. Too tall, too broad, stretched in a way that didn't look natural. Neither of us waited to understand it. We ran. We could hear heavy movement behind us. For a short while, then nothing. Later, he tried to reassure me, told me encounters like that were rare, that animals usually avoided people. I wanted to believe him, so we kept going. That turned out to be a mistake. Less than an hour later, in an open area, another young bear charged toward us. This one was clearly startled. He reacted instantly, rushing forward and yelling again. The bear veered off and disappeared. By then, my nerves were shot. But the worst part came that night. We've been alone on the trail the entire trip. No other hikers, no distant voices, just us. By the time darkness fell, my headlamp had failed, leaving only his light to guide us. We needed to stop, eat, and rest. The cold was setting in fast, and the wind cut through the trees, creating a constant howl that made it hard to hear anything clearly. Eventually, we found a clearing, a wide depression in the ground, almost like a bowl. The trees around it were dense, but inside the clearing, many were dead or fallen. The place felt wrong, empty in a way I couldn't explain. He tried to lighten the mood with his music, but the sound echoed strangely off the trees. It didn't help. Not long after, the woods went quiet again. No wind, no wildlife. We turned everything off and got into the tent. That's when we heard it. A heavy thud. Then another. Not distant. Inside the clearing. Something brushed along the side of the tent, pressing the fabric inward. The pressure was narrow, deliberate, almost like a finger dragging across it. I was shaking, barely able to whisper. We heard footsteps, slow, measured. Then, the entire side of the tent pushed inward. I raised my flashlight and aimed it at the fabric. A face pressed back. You could see the outline clearly. The nose, the mouth. The tent moved with each breath, slowly expanding and collapsing. Neither of us screamed. He reached for his weapon and chambered around. The sound was enough. The face pulled away. Fast footsteps retreated toward the edge of the clearing. We didn't leave the tent until the morning. When we finally did, the smell hit first. The remains of a fire had been urinated on. Footprints circled the tent, and handprints marked the fabric. We packed up in silence and left as soon as we could. To this day, I don't know what we encountered out there. I know bears. I know fear. And I know that whatever was in that clearing was not either of those things.